Imagine if every great civilization in history collapsed, following the same script, and we were repeating each step without realizing it. Not by accident. Not by bad luck, but because of a pattern that crosses centuries like an invisible signature. Empires rise, promising order, prosperity, security, and then something shifts. Values that once seemed unshakable begin to dissolve. Collective trust fractures. Truth becomes contested. And just before collapse, society often appears more confident than ever. Coincidence? Or cycle? What if the most dangerous moment for a civilization isn't when it is weak, but when it believes it is untouchable? That question echoes through ancient records, forgotten chronicles, and texts describing not only the past, but a human pattern that insists on repeating itself. A pattern many ignore, until it's too late. Why talk about this now? Because we live in an era that calls itself unprecedented, technological, connected, global, and yet it carries strangely familiar signals. Ancient societies also believed they had reached a final, permanent peak. Rome saw its engineering as eternal. Babylon trusted its walls. Other cultures celebrated wealth, innovation, and military power as guarantees of continuity. But historical records reveal something uncomfortable. Collapse never begins from the outside. The rupture always forms internally, culturally, morally, institutionally. Today, debates about truth, identity, authority, and purpose dominate the global stage. The question isn't whether we are identical to the past, but whether we are reproducing the same sequence of choices that preceded other falls. History doesn't shout, it whispers, and those who refuse to listen repeat. Ancient texts describe civilizations that prosper, expand, and then enter a curious phase. Excess. Excess confidence. Excess consumption. Excess concentrated power. Biblical narratives speak of societies abandoning principles that once sustained them: justice, responsibility, restraint, replacing them with collective pride. The language is symbolic, but the pattern is recognizable. When balance is lost, stability begins to erode from within. This isn't instant, mystical punishment. It's accumulated consequence. Systems that ignore their own limits become fragile. The recurring message is simple and unsettling. Decline doesn't start with invasions or catastrophes. It begins when a culture stops regulating itself, when prosperity eliminates vigilance, when comfort replaces awareness. Historians observe that civilizations in decline share predictable symptoms: extreme polarization, distrusted institutions, information saturation, leadership that is more symbolic than structural. Meanwhile, populations split between nostalgia and anxiety about the future. This environment creates invisible instability, not explosive, but erosive. Structures remain standing until they can no longer support their own weight. The striking part is that everyday life can still appear normal during this process. Markets function. Cities breathe. Entertainment thrives. That appearance of continuity masks deep transformation. History shows collapse rarely announces itself with sirens. It settles in as a routine until it becomes irreversible. Now, look at the present. Technology is redefining human relationships at unprecedented speed. Information travels faster than collective understanding can keep up. Truth competes with narrative. Traditional authority is questioned, sometimes wisely, sometimes impulsively. Global systems grow interdependent, meaning a localized failure can echo worldwide. This is an apocalyptic prediction. It's pattern recognition. Civilizations that expanded too quickly often faced identity crises. Who are we? What do we believe? What limits do we accept? When those questions lack shared answers, social cohesion weakens, and without cohesion, even powerful systems become unstable. The issue isn't whether technology is good or bad, but whether culture can evolve alongside it. The revelation lies in recognizing that this pattern isn't merely political or economic, it is human. Civilizations reflect the collective psychology of their people. When the pursuit of power replaces responsibility, when freedom ignores consequence, when historical memory fades, the system begins replaying ancient cycles. What looks new is the same dynamic in a different setting. Prosperity breeds complacency. Complacency breeds fragility. Fragility invites rupture. This cycle appears in records across cultures and eras, like an unwritten law of social behavior. The shock isn't that civilizations fall, but that nearly all believed they were the exception. There is a critical point in every pattern. The moment a society sees warning signs and chooses to ignore them, not out of malice, but comfort. Acknowledging fragility demands change. Change demands sacrifice. And civilizations at their peak rarely want to trade immediate stability for future resilience. That's the paradox. The more success accumulated, the less willingness for self-correction. Ancient writings describe this as collective hardening, not blindness, but refusal to act. Historically, this phase precedes late reforms or abrupt ruptures. The window for adjustment exists, but closes quietly. And when it closes, events feel sudden, even though the process was unfolding for decades. What does this mean for the future? Not an inevitable sentence, but an invitation to historical awareness. Civilizations don't fall by destiny. They fall by accumulated decisions. The pattern shows that adaptation, cultural memory, and collective responsibility can interrupt cycles. Ignoring signals accelerates them. The central question isn't predicting collapse. It's understanding how societies preserve cohesion amid change. The past offers maps, not rigid prophecies, and those maps suggest lasting stability depends less on external power and more on internal integrity. A civilization that understands its pattern gains something rare: choice. Perhaps the greatest mistake is believing collapse belongs only to history books. These are human processes, and human processes are ongoing. Each generation inherits structures built by others and decides whether to maintain, transform, or neglect them. The pattern ignores borders and ideologies. It responds only to the relationship between power, values, and collective awareness. Uncomfortable questions emerge. Are we learning from the past, or simply redesigning the same cycle? Are we strengthening foundations or decorating surfaces? History watches in silence, and silence often precedes decisive turns. The final signal is not fear, it is clarity. Civilizations fall when they forget who they are, why they exist, and which limits sustain them. The pattern is documented, repeated, available to anyone willing to look. The difference between repetition and renewal lies not in fate, but in collective awareness. Every society reaches moments when it must choose between immediate comfort and lasting stability. That choice is never announced as dramatic. It unfolds in daily priorities, in the values preserved or abandoned. And as the world moves forward, one question continues to echo across centuries. Will we recognize the pattern or become another chapter within it? The signal has been transmitted. The interpretation, he's now human.